This week, we're going to be researching the topic of research ethics, and this involves a few things. Often, doing media research involves working with people. We may be working with people who work in media industries to study what they do and why they work in the way that they do. Or we may be researching media users. We might even be doing both. But in either case, we're working with human subjects who have certain rights. They have the right to know what the implications of our research is. They have a right to know why we're researching them. They have a right to know what we're going to do with the research that we produce based on their data. So it's important to understand that whenever we're doing research in media that involves people, we have a set of ethical obligations towards those people. And knowing what those obligations are and knowing how they can be fulfilled is an important part of professional research. But the other thing that I want to consider today is about some of the social responsibilities that conversations about ethics imply. Now, quite often when we get involved into the topic of research ethics, we can get lost in administrative questions. So, when you're doing a research topic that involves people, you have to go through a set of ethical procedures. You have to, in the example of Monash, for example, you have to submit a proposal for your research to an ethics research panel that has to give you the permission and confirm that the procedures that you're putting in place treat people ethically, treat them fairly, make sure that you're not going to cause any harm to people, make sure that you've thought about all of the potential risks that are involved in researching, both from your perspective and from the perspective of the people that you're researching. But the other thing that the ethics question raises is the question of social responsibility, in terms of not only thinking about the rights of people who are in our studies, but also thinking about our responsibilities to the people who perhaps don't appear in media research. So one of the, I suppose, ambiguities or ironies of media research, I think, from an ethical point of view, is that quite often we spend a lot of time thinking about being ethical by thinking about how to treat the people in our research. But I think there's another question, which is thinking carefully about who we select to be in our research. What are our responsibilities as researchers to represent the voices and points of view of people who society doesn't hear from very often? So I want to take this opportunity to expand the conversation about ethics beyond the question of ethical procedures toward questions of social responsibility and how we can cast our eyes around to try and do research that maybe gives a visibility to groups of people who we don't hear about very often. And so we're going to talk about why ethics. We're going to talk about the history of ethics research, of research ethics. Where do they come from? Why do we have all these procedures in place? Thirdly, we're going to be talking about how media research encounters, I suppose, fairly unique ethical problems regarding to the question of privacy. Then thirdly, we're going to talk about how media research might address the issue of human rights in another way by thinking about how we can do research that increases the visibility of relatively under or misrepresented people. And then we're going to be wrapping up by thinking about what all of this means for your research. So we're going to be talking about why we have ethics procedures, what's the history behind it, and how does it apply to our research. What are the differences between ethics and social responsibility? But I think finally, this is all a useful gateway to think very critically about who media research is for. As Howard Becker once said, whose side are we on? Who do we want to represent in our research? And I suppose in one of the again, one of the ironies of ethics research is that quite often we're concerned with privacy, but visibility can be a really important issue here. And I want to talk about this in regard to a particular case study, which is the issue of gendered violence, and particularly looking at how this works out. These issues work within India, and to use this as a case study to think about how ethical issues can be used to embrace social responsibility as well. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next few videos.